the issue of contractual capacity. I know it's kind of an old topic, but it does, it is important, and it's been coming up quite a bit lately, particularly in the last slides where I'll talk about domicile. So let's just do a recap of contractual capacity of natural persons. And the first thing to note, guys, is that the legal age today, into the age of majority in our law, is now 18 years. This was changed from 21 sometime in the mid 1990s, as far as I remember. But and some people still think that the age of majority is 21. It's not. It's 18. And essentially, what this means is, if you are over the age of 18, you have absolute and total contractual capacity on your own to contract on your own. In terms of, so you've got 18 is the age of majority, and over the above of 18 can contract on their own, and they have full contractual capacity. There's various kinds of marriages, right? That we have in our law. So if you're over the age of 18 and you're not married, then you're considered to be an unmarried adult. Okay, so you're either going to be single, divorced, or widowed. But if you're single, divorced, or widowed, we can describe you as an unmarried adult as long as you're over the age of 18 years. Sometimes we have people who come in and they've been divorced or they're widowed, and we describe them as unmarried, and they question us and say, why am I described as unmarried? I'm a widow. I'd like to be described as a widow. It's just the way that the deeds office wants things to be done. So if you're unmarried above the age of 18, in our deeds office documents, we can describe you as an unmarried adult, and you have full contractual capacity without the need to get anyone's permission to contract with you. In terms of South African law, and we must distinguish between marriages which are governed by the law of South Africa versus marriages which are governed by the laws of a foreign country. And I'll deal with foreign laws in a moment, but let's just talk about marriages in South Africa. In South Africa, there's actually 3 matrimonial property regimes. There's persons married in community of property, and there's persons married out of community of property with the accrual system, and there's persons married out of community of property without the accrual system. Okay, so in our law, if you do absolutely nothing, if you simply go take your boyfriend or girlfriend, go and get married, you don't sign a single document, you will be deemed in our law to be married in community of property. If you want to be married out of community of property, well, then what you must do is you must go and see a notary, and that notary will help you to draft an antenuptial contract. And the antenuptial contract gets registered in the deeds office. The purpose of registration of the antenuptial contract in the deeds office is that it serves as the registration of the deeds office serves as a public record of the fact that you are married out of community of property. Okay, so if you got married in community of property, i.e. you do nothing at all, there's no ANC, you're then deemed to be married in community of property. Now, when you're married in community of property, then you have one joint estate, just one estate. Okay, and the way in community of property works is that two people come together and they essentially mass their assets and their liabilities. So if you're fortunate enough to marry someone in community of property who's very, very wealthy, and he is 10 million rand rich and has no debt, well, you automatically become a half share owner of all those assets. If you're very unfortunate and meet someone who's got lots and lots of debt and you marry that person, well, then you become half liable for those debts. Okay, and that's the nature of in community of property. I'm actually going to skip ahead to my slide on in community of property since I'm talking about it, right? So when you have a marriage in community of property, and this is the whole trick with guys with property law and property sales, is that, and let me give you an example of what the issue here is. I'm a single guy. I own a property in my own name. Okay. It's registered in the deeds office, and I buy it while I'm single. I then go and I get married in a community of property to my now spouse. Okay, The deeds office records don't automatically change. They stay exactly the same. They record me as being the owner. But because I've been married now in community of property, and I have one joint estate with my spouse now becomes a 50% owner of that property. Of whatever the equity is, 50% owns the equity. Whatever the debt is, they become 50% liable for the debt, right? So that's how this works. Now, when you do a deeds office search, and you come to me and you say, and I say to you, property practitioner, please sell my house for me. You take my name down, Marius van Rensburg, you do a deeds office search, you see that I own this property. This is where we mustn't make the assumption. So what I'm saying to you is always, the duty on you is always to say to me, Marius, we see that you're unmarried on your deed and the deeds office search. Are you now married? Yes, I'm married. How are you married? I am married in community of property. Great. Now we know, even though the deeds office search and the title deed is in my name only, my spouse must also sign because she's automatically a half share owner of that property. And over the years, we've seen this come out with a disastrous effect when people don't ask this question, and then when our seller wants to get out of the transaction. Because if only I sign the offer to purchase, my agreement is now not valid because it's not signed by my spouse. And there's a whole bunch of law around this, right? The law can get quite complicated and convoluted. But really, for our purposes, well, we want to make sure that when we list the property, it's in Marius van Rensburg name. Marius van Rensburg, how are you married? I'm married in community property. Great, Marius, we need your spouse to sign the offer to purchase as well, because your spouse is deemed to be a half share owner in law. And the conveyancing document, same thing. Marius van Rensburg, ID number, married to XYZ, blah, 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 and then that person, the spouse, also goes on all the conveyancing documents as well. So just bear that in mind. It's really important for getting this contractual capacity right. Guys, so that's the first matrimonial property regime, which is in community of property. Then there's out of community of property. You can have out of community with the accrual or without the accrual. Okay. I'm not going to go into the whole accrual story and what that means. What you must realize is it doesn't matter for our purposes. For our purposes in property, you're either in community or you're out of community of property. If you're out, are you with the accrual or without the accrual? It doesn't matter. It's got nothing to do with us, because that's just the division of assets between the two spouses and how the accrual system works versus out of community of property. The point for us is, if you're married out of community of property, you have your own separate estate. So my spouse has an estate and I have an estate. So when I get married, I don't adopt any of my spouse's assets or any of their liabilities. And I now have full contractual capacity to contract on my own. Whereas if I'm married in community of property, the Matrimonial Property Act says I can't buy or sell property without the consent of my spouse. In practical terms, that means our spouse signs the offer to purchase. So out of community of property, both have total separate contractual capacity. We can buy, sell, mortgage the property without the assistance of our spouse whatsoever. Okay, so that's, and again, guys, we sometimes say to people, "How are you married?" And they go, they actually don't know. And you'd be surprised how often people actually get this wrong. They actually don't know how they're married. It's astounding, but we still need to help these people because we need to get it right. So how do I know if someone is married out of community of property with out of community of property, right? What I can do is I can do a deed office search on that person's name in all the deed offices across South Africa and see if there's an internuptial contract registered. If I find the internuptial contract, I must, of course, go and get a copy, and I must look at the copy, right? Because I need to make sure that is not because the ANC doesn't apply to a prior marriage and applies to this current marriage. So that's the way I check if someone is married in or out of community of property. If they're in community of property, there'll be no internuptial contract. If they're out of community of property, then there'll be an internuptial contract that's registered. Because remember what I said in the beginning? The internuptial contract serves as a notice to third parties as to how these people are married, right? So that's really important. So now we've gone from unmarried adults, okay, above the age of 18. Then we have married adults who are of course, either in community property or out of community property. The fourth category of people is we have those people who are married according to Hindu or Muslim customary law. Okay, so over the last few years, there's been a lot of debate around the status of people who get married according to Muslim or Hindu rites. Remember, these are not marriages. We have in our law, we have marriages in terms of the Marriage Act, and we have customary marriages. So you can have marriage in terms of the Marriage Act. I'm getting married either in community or out of community or property, or I can have Muslim or Hindu customary marriages, and there's no legislation on this. And then I have Black customary marriages, and those are now governed by the recognition of Black Customary Marriages Act, which I'm going to come to in one of my slides coming up, right? So the issue here that we're now discussing is what is the status of people that are married according to Hindu or Muslim customary law? And there was a recent constitutional court case which essentially says that we recognize these marriages as being proper legal marriages. The constitutional court case said that we can't describe persons married according to Muslim and Hindu customary rights as unmarried, okay? But we're going to essentially treat them as an effective out-of-community or property marriage. So if you married according to Muslim or Hindu customary law, we're going to treat you as if you're married out of community property. So you can hear you both have your separate ability to contract for you can contract for your own. It's not an in-community property, it's effectively an out-of-community property marriage. And essentially what this constitutional court case did was it directed our legislature to create legislation that properly governs and regulates Muslim and Hindu customary marriages. And that legislation has not yet been finalized. But for now, what they've said to us is that we need to treat them as effectively out-of-community property marriages. So we will describe them as married according to Muslim or Hindu customary law. That's how I'll describe them in my conveyancing documents. And for the purposes of you guys, when you conclude the sale agreement, one party, the husband or the wife, can bind their own. They don't need the assistance of the other person. Okay. The next kind of marriage that I wanted to, so I'm jumping around my slides here. The next category of person that I want to deal with before I come to African customary marriages is persons married in court law, the laws of another country. Now this creates a lot of confusion, right? Because what we do is we say to someone, so let's say someone's married in the UK, Zimbabwe, America, Australia, whatever it is, we say to them, how are you married? And they go, I'm married in community property, or I'm married out of community. And there's an assumption that everyone who's married in another country is in community property. That's not the case. The way our deeds office views foreign marriages is our deeds office says, if you marry according to the laws of another country, we are going to regard you as married according to the laws of a foreign country. So you have what we call a foreign marriage. So we have South African marriages and foreign marriages. So our deeds office looks at all the countries around the world and says, we know what the law in South Africa is. We can follow that law and any changes. We can't follow the law in other countries. Therefore, we treat those marriages as foreign marriages, and we treat them for deeds office purposes as potential in community properties. And this means that we assume that there might be a joint estate, and we protect those people. So when you complete your offer to purchase, right? You're gonna how are they married? They're married according to, it's a foreign marriage, not in community, not out of community. It's a foreign marriage, and there's some rules. When you're selling the property of somebody who's a foreigner, okay, if the property is only in one spouse's, if it's in both spouses' name, right, then they'll both sign the offer to purchase, no problem. If it's only in one spouse's name, and I'm going to assume that it's in the husband's name, I need the spouse to assist the wife, to assist the husband in selling the property. So of course, I only need the husband to sign the offer to purchase, but the conveyancing documentation will also be signed by the spouse. Why? Because the deeds office wants to know that if there's a potential in community or property estate, based on whatever the laws in that particular country is, we want to make sure that the spouse is aware of the disposition of a property in the potential in community or property estate in that country. So we just basically, it's a fail-safe to protect the other spouse, right? So what I always say to you guys is, please ensure that we know. So you see that's in the husband's name, please ensure we know where the wife is. Because the wife, and I suggest we make the wife sign the agreement as, or maybe as a witness, for example, right? Just get them to sign as a witness so we know that they're around. Because we've had an example in the past where the guy signed, husband signed, and then we discovered that they hate each other and the wife's never going to sign. The way around this, let's assume they do hate each other. The way around this is I can get an opinion from a local university to say that the law in that country is out of community of property. I can present at the deeds office, and then I can dispense of having to have the wife sign. So again, it's a case of just planning a little bit, making sure the spouse is around. If the spouse is not going to sign for whatever reason, talk to us. Let's make a plan. When it comes to buying, if both foreigners buy it in both their names, no problem. But if one person wants to buy in their name, it does become a potential problem. So what people sometimes call me and say, Marius, I've got foreigners, they're not sure what to do. Should they put it in both their names or one person's name? I say to them, put in both their names. Why? It simplifies our lives completely, all right? The rules here are this. If the foreigners, and again, I'm gonna use the husband, we want to put the property in the husband's name, it's a cash deal. I don't need the spouse because the deeds office doesn't see any prejudice. It's a cash deal. You've acquired an asset into potential joint estate, and it'll go into the husband's name. When he sells, of course, he'll need the permission of the assistance of his spouse to sell. When there's a bond, okay, it is possible for us to register a property into the one foreign spouse's name without the other one, but then the spouse must assist. The spouse must assist the other spouse in taking out the bond. So in other words, the deeds office needs to see on the deeds office documents sorry, I lost you guys here for a second. The deeds office needs to see on the deeds office documents that when there's a debt being created in the joint estate, the deeds office needs to see that the spouse is aware of that debt in the potential joint estate, okay? But as a general proposition, guys, bonds and foreign marriages are actually problematic because many banks take the view, and they change their rules all the time. As far as I remember at the moment, I think it's FNB and Standard Bank who have this rule that if they're granting a bond to a foreigner, right, then what they want is they want the bonds, they want both spouses to be buyers on the offer to purchase. So that's just the internal rule, even though in law it's possible to register the property in the one spouse's name. Okay, non-residents are people who don't live in South Africa. Despite all the discussion and talk around non-residents not being able to buy property and potentially put in restrictions, there is no restriction, okay? If you live in another country, you want to buy property in this country, there's no restriction, you can buy property. You can live anywhere in the world and you can buy property in South Africa, there's no restriction on you. It's different if you rent the property. If you are a foreigner and you want to rent the property, in terms of the Aliens Control Act, you have to have a residence permit in order to be able to rent the property. But as a foreigner, you can simply carry on and buy property. Right, customary marriages, and this is black customary marriages, and these these are governed by the by the Recognition of Customary Marriages Act. All right, so and the important date here is the 15th of November. So if you have monogamous customary marriages before the 15th of November 2000, they are deemed to be in community of property, whilst you have marriages where the husband has more than one wife, are subject to customary law and are considered marriages out of community of property. Guys, this is a particularly confusing part of the law. And what I suggest you do is when you list a property and you can see who the parties are, no problem. if you find buyers and those buyers were married according to black customary law, please call me. Let's sit down and go through it so we can make absolutely certain that we're getting it right. Marriages entered into after the 15th of November 2000 are like any other normal civil marriage, right? So once we had the Recognition of Black Customary Marriages Act, which came into effect on the 15th of November 2000, if the parties don't enter into an internuptial contract, they're deemed in community of property. If they do enter into ANC, then they're deemed out of community of property. Okay? Where the husband has more than one spouse, what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to go to court, bring an application to court, and get an order of court to regulate that marriage. Okay, so you can see how it can become a little bit more difficult, but it's almost a case of we need to take these things one step at a time and just try and figure it out. The other issue with customary marriages is that there is provision for customary marriages to be registered, but most people who enter into customary marriages don't register them. So then sometimes we face with a scenario of, well, there's the customary marriages, the black customary marriages, customary marriage process from agreeing the lobolo to going through the ceremony, and there's a certain number of steps that need to be taken. And of course, very often what happens is the parties enter the customary marriage, go through the steps, and then a year or 3 later or 10 years later, they decide they want to fight about it. And then they argue, and this is how these things come before our courts, and this is how we get case law. They argue about the extent to which we are the extent to which there is a valid marriage in place, because there's no official registration for that particular marriage. So, guys, I think that actually sounds as clear as mud, but in most cases it's not too difficult. But please, if you need help, I can suggest that you give me a call, and we will certainly try and unravel it and look at all the exact facts. Civil unions, these are for gay marriages. And they are governed by the Civil Unions Act, right? And again, it's the same as black customary marriages after 15 November 2000 and in the year 2000, and the same as normal marriages consummated in terms of the Marriages Act. If you do an ANC, you're out of community of property. If you don't do an ANC, then you are in community of property. Guys, minors are very important, and they're very important to understand. A minor is a person who is younger than 18 years of age. So people who are below the 18 years of age can buy property. They can buy property, but they must be assisted by their parents or their guardians when they enter into that contract. But guys, the question arises, is it a good idea for people to buy properties into their children's names who are below the age of 18? And the truth of the matter is, no, it's a terrible idea. And the reason why it's a terrible idea is because when you sell the property, it's problematic. So let me give you an example of one or two of the cases we've had. We've had cases where we presented with an offer to purchase, and we see the sellers are children, and they're like, you're not talking about 17 when you can wait a year and then they're 18 and they can do it themselves. If the children are like anything below the age of 18, when they sell their property, what we have to do is if that charge share is valued 250,000 or less, I must bring an application to the Master of the High Court and get permission for those children to sell the property. If the property is over the age of 250,000 rand, right? The property value is more than 250,000 rand. I must bring a substantive application based on affidavits to the High Court for the permission of the High Court to get a court order to allow the children to sell the property. And that application is going to take 4 to 6 to 8 months. And even now, I can tell you the court rolls are filled up. To get on the court roll is not that easy. On an unopposed basis, you could probably do it within 6 to 8 months, be in and out of the court, but it costs money. It'll cost you 40 to 50,000 rand. It'll probably take you at least 6 months to get a court order, right? So when we understand that when minors want to sell property, they need this permission from, in terms of the Master's Office, or they need permission from the High Court, we now know it's not a good idea to buy property into minors' names. Okay, And also, when you guys list property, you've got to ascertain, are these people minors? If they are minors, come talk to us in advance. Let us assess the matter. Let's in advance start the process of making those applications to court so we can avoid the delays that inevitably result from the having to bring the court process. So when the miner buys properties, that's how it works. If when a miner sells property, when the miner sells property, as I was saying, that you need the permission of the High Court, or you need permission of the master if it's below 250. Okay, a miner can, and this is the whole issue. When the miner buys property, if the property is paid in cash, I just register the property into the miner's name, and all I say is Marius van Rensburg, an unmarried miner. That's it. So as long as the parents and the guardian sign the agreement to sale, I can register the property into the miner's name, no problem, when it's cash. The problem, as I was saying earlier, was it comes when we're going to sell that property, we have to get the permission of the High Court or the Master's Office. There is provision that when a miner buys a property, the miner can take out a mortgage bond. But guys, I've been doing this quarter of a century. I've never seen it happen. It's just not practical, but if you were to do it, it's possible. Again, if the miners share the property is less than 250, permission of the Master of the High Court. If the miner shares below 250, I must go and get a court order from the High Court. But again, I'm just saying it doesn't really happen. What's the solution? Well, the solution is, of course, to go and get to register a trust or buy the property into a company. Guys, insolvents. When someone has their status been sequestrated, guys, you must do the deeds officer searches, look up the caveats, and then we must just understand, guys, that anybody who's insolvent must get the permission of their trustee. The trustee appointed by the master in order for them to sell their property. Guys, domicile is one of those issues that arises, and I'm going to run slightly out of time here, so I'm just going to jump straight to my example because I think it explains things quite well. So domicile. So when we often confronted this issue of domicile, right? What country's laws apply to the marriage? Now so the answer to the question is the domicile of the husband in the marriage. So wherever the husband is domiciled, the law at the time of the marriage, the laws of that country will apply to marriage. So there's three possibilities here. You either married in community property, out of community, or you married according to the laws of a different country. So let me give you some examples. Mr. H is a citizen of South Africa. He meets Mrs. W, who's an American citizen. Mr. H decides to go to London on a 6-month contract just to get some experience. He takes Mrs. W with, and whilst they're in London, they decide they're going to get married, and they get married, and they're going to get a British marriage certificate. But under these circumstances, guys, Mr. H's domicile is South Africa, because he never intended to leave South Africa. He's always going to come back to South Africa, and domicile is a state of mind. It's where you come back after your travels, where it's where you practically are going to return to what you consider to be your home. And because South Africa is Mr. H's domicile, the laws of South Africa will govern the marriage, even though he has a British marriage certificate and was married in the UK. And because he didn't enter into a contract before he left South Africa, he's deemed to be married in community of property. If he thought about this, he would have done an ANC in South Africa, then gone to London, got married there, but then he'd be married according to the laws of South Africa out of community of property, right? So you can see, guys, how this gets quite confusing. And of course, these issues really come out when Mr. H and Mrs. W decide they don't love each other anymore, because they'll argue. Mrs. W will most certainly say, our marriage is governed by the laws of South Africa, because in South Africa, we married in community property and I want half of your assets. Whereas Mr. H might say, no, we married according to the laws of the UK, where we're out of community property, you don't get half my assets. So change the facts slightly, right? If it was Mr. H's intention to go to London and never return to South Africa ever, then London would become his domicile, and the laws of the United Kingdom would apply to the marriage because it's the husband's domicile. So guys, when you come across these guys, please give us a call. we come across deeds where I've got one in the office now where the guy's bought 3 properties, and in each deed he's got a different answer somewhere along the line. So it can be quite confusing. Please, guys, that's why we're here. Give us a call when you are ready and you come across these examples, and we'll certainly try and assist you. Right, guys, sorry I rushed those last slides, but I hope I've been clear, notwithstanding my rushing. But I see it is 1 minute past 10, so apologies, Michelle, I took a minute of your time. I have a question here. If the couple is married under the other country's law, the buyer falls into arrears, will the other party be implicated? No. So if the property is registered, if I have foreigners, the marriage laws of a foreign country, and it's only in the husband's name, and he takes a bond, if he falls into arrears, the bank will only chase the husband for the money. So it's so even though the spouse assists in the registration of the bond and the acquisition of the property, it's only the husband's property, and it's only the husband's life under the bond. So no, the bank won't chase the spouse. Okay, guys. If you do need, by the way, if you this document that I've got on screen is in my property law manual. It's on our website as well. So if you do want to take some time to read through it slowly or give me a call, you're more than welcome.
Thanks, Marius. Extremely informative. And once again, thank you so much for all your input. We appreciate it, everyone.
Apologies for the rush. And have a good rest of your